Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to Murder We Spoke.
Woo. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Matt. And today, we're going to be talking about who?
John Wayne Gacy.
The killer clown. Mm-hmm. So this is the person that is essentially the real life It, or Pennywise, the dancing clown. Except, he's horrible. He legitimately is probably one of the worst people that have ever existed.
Every time I walk away from doing the research, I always turn around and go, man, this guy's a bad guy.
Yeah.
Man, you never know the full extent of how bad of a person is. And this is a good example of your neighbor, your friends, your family, your uncle that's really funny. Mm-hmm. This is the prime example that they could be anybody. And just because you think you know them doesn't mean you actually know them.
Big time, especially since he was so normal and everything. He really blended in with society very well. And on top of that, a lot of the people that were his workers that worked underneath them kind of described him as like the happy, goofy uncle. So it's very crazy that of all people, this unsuspecting person was just making all these kids disappear and everything. Nuts.
I think that defines how evil this man was, that he could look somebody in the eye and giggle and joke around and knowing that, like, if you were in his house and you were standing, we'll get to it.
Exactly.
No spoilers here. No spoil alerts here.
All right, so getting right into the mix. So John Wayne Gacy, who he was an American serial killer and sex offender known as the Killer Clown. Who assaulted and murdered at least 33 young men and boys. And let me tell you, men is a very loose term.
Yeah, I was like, what men?
Yeah,
I was like,
they were
when I
all
heard
young
that, they
kids.
were like men. And I was like, what men? Because this is like maybe young adult, I would describe them as more than like...
Yeah, like, I wouldn't even say like full-blown adult because technically, I don't know, if I was the age of some of these kids, thinking back to that time when I was the age of some of these kids, even the oldest ones, I'm like, no, I'm not an adult yet. I'm not a man because I'm not really contributing to society. I'm not out there working or paying taxes or anything.
It's like college age, I would think.
Yeah, no, big time. College age, like maybe in the middle of college or like even maybe reconsidering what you wanted to major in college.
Yeah, like
that kind of age. Yeah, it wasn't
Every time they said men, I was like, what men? I was like, where men? I was like, I don't, like a lot of other serial killers that we talked about, you can say they killed men and women. This is a guy who had a fixation on children.
Yeah.
Male children.
Really young men,
young adults.
If young adults, young children.
Teenagers.
Big time. Yeah,
I even want to say teenagers.
Because even some of the kids that, he would hang around and everything were a lot younger, especially when he would portray himself as, his side gig as Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown and everything.
Two different personalities.
Yeah, exactly, because technically he's not really hanging around with the kids that, he would go after to, do his assaults on. These are younger kids and everything that I can only imagine what was going through his head at these parties and everything. And he would even go and visit hospitals, so like children's hospitals and stuff.
Thinking, like the way he hearing the way that he actually like tricked these boys into him trapping them and it being a game like the whole time. I think you'll get into it a little bit later.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Woof.
But God.
But alrighty, so going even further, here we go as John Wayne Gacy's early life. Born in Chicago, which is predominantly where he lived a good majority of his life, even when he started doing all these murders and everything. Born March 17, 1942. Second child and only son. Father was an auto repair mechanist and World War I veteran, which is crazy to think about because that's an entirely different lifestyle from there. Being World War I, that's nuts. I mean, my father's father, so my grandfather, served in World War II.
Yeah. Think about how old I just there's like so many theories about cause and effect of like why so many serial killers were around during this time. Why were only that time did we have, not only that time, but a large group of serial killers. They said it had something to do with the fathers coming back from war.
Yeah, and being so authoritative and everything.
And also them coming back being all messed up and needing help and not having that help, and them taking out on their kids, and the kids also seeing like at one point, like, people were seeing like the Vietnam War, and people were seeing, you know, they were seeing people not come home. They said that messed up that generation, and that's why more kids came out, you know. It's you know, but
plus at that time they were televising Vietnam War and everything, and showing like how gruesome war is. It's not like something that, you know, sure, there's a little glory to war and everything, or at least like Inglourious Bastards and everything kind of seems to like glorify it. Even just in general, like whenever we learn about World War I and World War II, it's like, sure, we're doing a good thing by trying to like stop people that we would deem as not good people in the world and everything, but it's definitely not an easy thing to go out and kill another human.
Yeah, especially when you know that human most likely was forced
to do this stuff.
So you can tell, like, those dads coming back, how, you know, you hear stories about how some people were very, very messed up, and their personalities changed, and they ended up, you know, taking it out on their kids, as, you know.
Yeah, whether it be PTSD or whatever it might have been, or even just, like, the training when it comes to, like, serving in the military. Like, I'll never forget, like, kids that went to military school after we graduated high school, hearing stories about, like, our friends in the Marines, hearing, like, on the loudspeakers a baby cry and having the words repeat, like, intermittently, like, kill it. Like, they're automatically training you to kind of be that serial killer mindset, unfortunately. Like, so, that's pretty rough. I mean,
they come home and could you imagine? I couldn't imagine. I mean, I'm not giving anybody who, you know, hurts their kid, or, you know, you are their protector. Like, I don't give any, I see why, but I don't give that excuse. Like, for me, it's like, I understand where you're coming from, but you can never, you know, like, breeze by and be like, just because they, you know, I don't know.
I feel like it's this whole, I don't know, if that story is true, like, I want to, like, I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine somebody lying about something like that. But still, you know, I always like to throw a grain of salt to the wind. There we go. Regardless if that story is true or not, whether it be like some sort of programming mindset about that kind of situation and everything, then still, like, definitely seek help afterwards, after, like, you're retired or can't imagine living in a military life or anything like that. You know, if you're having any kind of, like, suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, definitely speak with somebody. You know, I mean, that's what they're there for. You know, there's, especially now, I feel like nowadays there's a lot more acceptance when it comes to any kind of counseling to prevent anything like that.
And we'll also drop links in the description if you need any help for any, you know, like any crisis helplines or anything that you need. But he was, from what I heard, he was very abused.
Yeah, oh my God, big
very,
time.
like, and only him. Like, it was like, oh, so he had two other sisters, like and he was the only son. He liked being, you know, like, who doesn't like being with their mom? Like, even if
whatever. I mean, that's like the typical Oedipal thing, right? You always want to be closer to your mom as a young kid or whatever.
You. I mean, your mom created you. I mean,
you have this fondness for your mom for a bit. Yeah,
and the dad would pick on him for that. You know, calling him very not great names.
Yeah, oh my God. I mean, some of the stuff we can't even really say.
Yeah.
Because some of it is just so degrading and everything, but having to live through that on a daily basis, I can't even imagine.
Yeah. And I know it could take an effect on a kid, you know, from a very young age, being called all those names, and, you know, your self-confidence goes down.
And even in Gacy's eyes, like, he never felt good enough for his father. So
it was always even even what I heard, it was always to appease his dad. It's always to make his dad happy. And then like later on, later on in what I read, he eventually his dad goes, "I am proud of you. I'm so sorry for doing all those things to him." But to you, but only
even then, it's all too late. He finally lived up to his expectations, and it was after his first son being born.
And that
he already had a daughter at that time.
He had a daughter, and then he had a second kid. And at that point, it's like, okay, thanks for telling me you're proud of me. After I did what normal, like I'd never forgive anybody who does any of these horrible things, but
Because especially to a parent, you're supposed to love your kid unconditionally. Like,
I also think this is a prime example that there can be serial killers that are born bad, and there can be serial killers that are made bad.
Yeah, I feel like he was made bad. I feel like he wasn't always a bad person, but I feel like just from the abuse that he suffered through and like the beatings that he had to endure and everything.
He also hit his head very hard. With a swing. It was back then. The swings were made of, so obviously the I wouldn't call them strings, the metal chain that holds them together, and then it was made out of solid wood, so like really hard wood. So he was playing around, or he jumped off or something like that, and the swing swung back and hit him directly in his face and knocked him out. So, they did say from then on he had blackouts where he didn't remember.
He would have seizures. Plus, he had that congenital heart disorder and everything.
So that made him even more of an outcast than he already was at that point with kids his age. So he was alone. He was getting verbally abused, physically abused.
And I could imagine getting bullied. Like, if you're not physically fit a lot of the time, you're the one... Yeah,
he was bigger because he
couldn't be active because of his heart condition and everything.
I think it was a born defect.
Yeah, right? And a lot of times, like, he ended up in the hospital for like a year. Yeah. And his family, well, technically his father thought he was faking the entire thing the entire time. But could you imagine being sick for like a year and not having somebody that you look up to believe you? Your own father, like, not believing you.
And it's something that you were born with.
Yeah.
So I can see... He had a very, very rough childhood.
That's putting it lightly.
Yeah, that really is putting it lightly. A very lonely childhood, I would say. He did have his mom and he did have his sisters, but, everybody, all boys love their dad too. Like,
big time.
Parents equally impact their children. Like, both parents. Like,
that's
not
the person
just
that you look up
dad,
to.
But it's also the mom too. So, like, I could see this was heading down a bad road to begin with, and I don't like, blaming parents. I don't. But, cause and effect. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, big time. Because it really, I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong, but it really does seem like more environment than it is nature. I don't know.
I mean, it's hit or miss because some serial killers that we will talk about do have bad tendencies from the beginning, but that's more associated with like mental illness.
Yeah, plus usually those kids you hear about like harming animals and stuff at a young age.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't find anywhere where I was seeing Gacy harming like animals or showing any kind of like homicidal kind of ideation where he was unsympathetic towards things up until later on in life.
Yeah, like I know later on, from what I know, later on he did run away from home.
Yeah.
He did work in a mortuary.
Yes, exactly.
He did lay with...
That's also the other thing. Yeah, we're getting into his career.
Oh, God. He did lay with a body.
Yeah, it was a teenage body. So this is technically where it kind of like starts up at. Yeah. But at the same time, once he laid with that body, like even he felt dirty. He felt guilty from doing that.
Moving on, yeah.
So,
but it might have, not saying that anybody should go on and do this. I don't promote this. But, maybe was like a preference for him, I don't think it's a good preference. I think you need help.
Big time. Because if you're like laying with somebody that's, deceased and everything, that's not a healthy relationship because one, you can't actually have a relationship with something that's non-living.
I know I know his sister did ask. I did read somewhere. Did ask him, like, how did you deal with all the working in a mortuary, and how did you deal with that? And he was like, oh, it was easier than you would think it was. So already you can see, like, he was already heading towards that path, and then was like, okay, this isn't good. And
it was an unhealthy relationship. So even he like realized that after doing it, like he felt so sick after doing it. He called his father up, even though he had a bad relationship with his father and everything. Especially since that's kind of the reason why he ran away, because he started up as like a Democratic, like in politics, like at the age of 18, he was already working his way up in politics, which is insane.
He was very persuasive from the beginning. He was a model case of a sociopath. Like, if you want to know what a sociopath is, he is. And I have later on, when we find out what happens to him later on, I have a tidbit that I found out, and I was like, well, that's actually something I did not know about. But...
No, exactly. So he started up in politics and everything. His father didn't agree with that. I can't remember the exact terminology. I didn't put it in this document. But he looked down upon him. He was like, yeah, you're working with the Democratic Party. You're like a sissy for working with the Democrats.
Nothing
like, I don't
ever
understand.
was good
it was never good in his father's eyes. So because of that, plus, at the time, his father helped him get a car and everything. And his father, I can't even shoot. Now I'm drawing a blank on what caused him to take away, like, one of the parts of the car. It wasn't like the muffler. A car could run off without a muffler and everything. But so Gacy was like, all right, well, he took away his keys initially. So when the father realized he got a spare set of keys made, so that way, even though his keys may have been taken away from his father took away a main portion of the car. They can't really, the car can't function then. So when he got that part back, that's when he left home, went to Vegas, worked with this mortuary as a mortuary attendant, and from there ended up later on calling his father after the whole incident with laying with the teenage body, which he was like, yeah, this is gross. This is even grossing me out. This is really bad.
Yeah, he was, like I said, like the sociopath. Like I said, but he was very smart in that sense.
Oh my God,
he was very like...
He was very intelligent.
Very intelligent.
Because
which is scary.
Not only with the politics and everything, but also just managerial-wise, he knew how to run a business.
He ran businesses. He ran more than one business.
Yeah, oh my God.
Read his... he did, from what I know, he did get married.
Yeah, twice.
Twice.
It wasn't just once, twice. So
I don't know how, but I think the first wife left him because that was the second wife. The first wife, I don't remember.
What was even, I mean, well,
we'll get
oh man, I know. I want to say now, but we're going to get into it. I mean, it just, this guy is nuts. Like, that's the thing that's most amazing is that really seems like such a normal person. He had so much going for him. He didn't have to do all these murders.
But you knew that it was probably something, that proves that it probably was something he wanted to do. And this was, the thing.
I feel like it was something that, like, there's an event that we'll talk later about. And from that, it leads into the murder side of it.
They actually said, in what I read, the difference between what he did and what other serial killers do is what he did was, so he's, like I said, that he's a sociopath. What sociopaths do that makes them different from other, people who have mental illness, is that sociopaths calculatedly plan it. So they are fully aware of what they're doing. So they said they, in the court of law, they do view sociopaths as like, you did it, you meant to do it, you planned to do it. In almost all cases.
I feel like later on, they did, like when push comes to shove, when the whole court case comes out and everything, they do find out that he legitimately did have that sociopath serial killer mindset because he planned.
No, they almost we're skipping ahead, but
Yeah.
they almost didn't know how to diagnose him because he went to 5, 6, 7,
and
8
he was
different-
very
they
smart
couldn't
about it.
diagnose
Yeah, they originally diagnosed him
know,
as like schizophrenic.
The thing about sociopaths is that they can blend in. So whatever you
Yeah, oh
want
my
them
God,
to
yeah, he
be,
was a
they will
chameleon.
be. Whatever this person wants them to be, they will be. Whatever they deem they need to do to continue moving forward, they will be. So that's the scary thing about them is they're like geckos. They're not geckos.
Yeah, all my
They're like
chameleons. So
yeah.
he was
They
the
blend
social
in.
chameleon big time because so skimming through this whole career wise, he was in the trainee position, none but shoe company. Then he was eventually promoted to manager. Bam. So that's where already like he's moving up the ranks quick. So, and even from there, like from that managerial experience, he ended up meeting with this girl, Myers there, Marilyn Myers. She was a
his first wife,
co-worker
right?
of the shoe company. And then his father-in-law from that technically ends up becoming his first wife.
Yeah.
The father-in-law ends up buying 3 KFCs. Gacy ran 3 KFCs. Yeah.
And was very well off. Like he was very well off. And it was in Waterloo. I know he lived in another state and then moved back to Waterloo. Or he moved to Waterloo and then moved to a different state.
Yep.
I'm skipping ahead again. But he was very smart and very, I'll keep repeating scary because he was the one he's a business owner. He's an entrepreneur. He's not the one that you should be like anybody would look at, you know, and be like, that's the person who did, you know. He did have a slip up. Where he was, if I stand corrected, he was giving minors, was it alcohol?
Well, it was a little bit of both because he was luring them in with 1, alcohol, 2, stag films.
Yeah.
So pornography essentially.
Yeah.
So from there he was like coercing these kids, these teenagers into having sex with him. And sometimes possibly like giving them hush money and stuff like that to stay quiet. Or in all honesty, I'm sure a lot of the times just like guilting them into staying quiet because, you know, who's going to openly release that? I mean, that's where I honestly completely understand the whole like Me Too movement.
Yeah.
Sure, it's like 30 years later, but coming back now to it, like having such an open environment and everything to actually
Very
open
hard
up.
to think that back then it was just like a hush, hush,
Yeah,
hush, hush.
like who's going to
Quiet,
believe
you know?
you? And if somebody even does like consider believing you, what's going to happen from it? Because he was very powerful. He was in with a lot of politicians and everything.
But it did catch up with him. So
Oh my God, yeah, big time.
One guy did report him eventually, and Gacy's response to this was paying off a kid to come and beat up that kid.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind
And
of
tell
like,
him if you do not drop or if you testify, I'm gonna continue to beat you up. So that kid was very brave and went on and testified against him.
But not only that, the kid that ended up beating up the other kid ended up also throwing him under the bus and being like, "Why'd you beat that kid up?" Because I was paid by Gacy to beat that kid up.
Yeah.
So of course, from there, that's where Gacy ended up going to jail.
Yeah, he went to jail and you know, in these cases back then, they used to slap them on the wrist and go, "Okay, you'll do a little bit of time, you'll be fine." This judge was a no business judge. This judge said 10 years.
Yeah,
10 years, but he didn't serve the 10
didn't
years.
serve the entire
he served
10
like
18 months.
18 months.
18
and they let him
months
out.
Because guess what?
Good
he was
citizen.
a model prisoner. Model prisoner. He was advocating for prisoners. He was making huge changes in this prison for these prisoners.
The
he even got
guards
them
loved him.
a mini golf course. That's how well he was performing in this prison. So
it's so weird
Yeah.
to think that like they would be like, okay, this guy's gonna go out and be a good guy. Like you're like, oh, okay. It disturbed me a little that you know I don't understand, but
No, exactly.
what I'm saying it would be more understandable if it was like 5-6 years in prison and then for good behavior you're let out.
Yeah.
That seems a little ridiculous to me, and if this doesn't prove that at that point or at this point that the system is a little broken,
I mean, I feel like, sure, if he was really good and everything, proved himself, got out early, there still should have been a very long probation, equating to the 10 years. Somebody eyeing him the entire time.
Checking.
Exactly. Somebody
But
should
back
have been
then-
following him, keeping an eye on him. This whole thing wouldn't even be an issue if somebody stayed around him, like what happened later on in his eventual arrest. If they just did that from the get-go when he was released from prison, because if he served his 10-year prison sentence, the last victim that he murdered, he would have just been released from jail at that time.
Yeah.
Mr. Alex.
I wonder if him also getting out early has anything to do with the fact that he was already making deep-rooted connections into politics and the stag industry.
Big time.
Because I remember when we were watching the documentary, they said that he had a really big impact on and spreading the stag industry in multiple places too.
Yeah. And he even caused I'm drawing a blank on their name. The MCs. The MC group, he made their enrollment jump up like tenfold just from the stag films and everything.
He was it's very, very,
Yeah,
I'm
he
going to
just-
continue to say scary. Scary is the word of the day.
Yeah, unfortunately, like he just had that kind of business brain. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, he honestly knew sex sells, which is
Yeah.
unfortunately, well, a lot like the advertising company is. Like, whether it be subliminal or explicit,
He was
you know,
very,
not all advertising, but
he was
you
very
know.
smart, and I'm going to continue scary. Again, just a glitter over the head. It's hard to even like,
I think I get your point, because what you're saying is like,
Yeah.
okay, a crazy person is already scary.
And
now you
that's
have
what-
a smart person who's also crazy.
Yeah.
That's very scary.
That's a
and he
real
went to
world
jail.
Joker.
He
That's
went to,
all
he
it
went
is.
to jail. He had a history of this. I think he even had a history before he even went to jail. But he had at
Well,
one point he
I'm-
had such a long rap sheet that they're like,
I mean, technically, he was also molested as a kid too.
Yeah,
by
he
a
was
family.
by
It was by like a family
contractor. It
friend
was like
that
a
was working.
contractor.
Well, yeah, a contractor working across the street or whatever
Mm-hmm.
that would just like be like, "Hey, kid, you want to hang out?" And lo and behold, yeah, that person themselves was also like doing similar. Not well. I mean, they don't explicitly say, or Gacy doesn't say like what necessarily went on. Whether it
they
be
just
like.
hinted, like he didn't
Yeah,
ever really.
like he just mentions that. Yeah, no, I was like sexually assaulted as a child and everything, and that's pretty much it. Like they don't explain like how far it went. Maybe it could have been like an S&M, like sick and twisted kind of sexual assault or whatever.
It definitely is scary, and it gets scary later on.
Yeah, because he's very intimidating to these kids and everything. And
What he would do is, now that I can say, now that we're
Mm-hmm.
on that part, he gets out, nothing good happens from
Yeah,
what
big
I
time.
said. So I read that he did was he'd be like, come and, after a job or whatever, he'd say, come with me, we can drink beers, whatever.
Yeah.
He'd go with them, and then he goes, let me show you a trick.
oh yeah,
And he'd go, okay, see these handcuffs? And he'd get out of the handcuffs, and he goes, okay, so I'm going to give them to you. Why don't you try? And they put themselves in the handcuffs, and now they're in handcuffs.
and they can't get out.
And they can't get out.
And you know what? Most of his victims are like, "How'd you do that?"
Yeah.
Like
How'd you do, like it was
yeah.
a magic trick.
And
like
he's
it was-
like, the trick is you have to have the key.
yeah, you have to have the key.
Yeah.
And I know I watched an interview with one of the, not even a victim, because he got free and nothing
Yeah,
ever
that
happened
was
to him.
another
Yeah.
fact I had saved for later. That was one of the
Sorry,
morbid miscellaneous.
Yeah.
But no, definitely we talked about it. It's somebody that was actually a wrestler. They were a wrestler, and so they're used to getting out of like sticky situations like that. Plus, he was a strong kid, so he was able to overpower
He
him.
said, if I panicked as soon as those handcuffs went on me, I would have been one of those victims.
Yeah.
He goes,
Yeah.
I was level-headed, and somehow I got the handcuff on him. And then he was like, wow, you're the only person. He didn't know that till later on when he heard the news of what happened. He said, "What?" He goes, wow, that's never happened to me before.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever got
Yeah.
the handcuffs on me.
Yeah.
And he didn't know that what that meant until later on.
It's nuts because, definitely that kid could have been another number in his count. Yeah. Just
they worked
but it's
together after
crazy. It's crazy that he didn't just turn him in from there.
He actually worked with him a
Yeah,
little bit
big
more
time.
after
A
that.
lot of
They
these
said
kids
that-
worked with them. It's nuts.
And he didn't realize. He didn't realize. He was like, I didn't realize what it actually was because he was like, I was young. It wasn't.
Plus,
I
the
was,
pay was
you know,
good. He
the
was
pay
giving
was
like the kids like $15 an hour
Which
or
back
something
then
like that at the
was
time, which is
lot of money.
exorbitant. That's
Yeah.
a lot of money to be making as a teenager, fresh out of high school or not finishing high school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we get like all these kids. Maybe it might not have been 15 or whatever, but
But
it was
still,
definitely a lot more
yeah.
than what they would have been making at the time.
Yeah.
You guys want to go to a quick ad break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about like what he did and how.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
Right now, we're going to go to an ad break. We'll be back to talking about Gacy in a brief moment. Talk to you soon. Bye. Hello, everybody. I'm here to talk to you about a very important topic. It is known as the service that you could hear books in your earlobes, known as Audible. And you could listen to books such as Defending a Monster.
Yeah, defending a monster.
Defending a Monster, which
Very
is a
good
book
book.
about Gacy. So if you're interested in furthering your research in regards to John Wayne Gacy after hearing our podcast together, then please feel free to go on to spacezamboni.com/audible.
You can listen. You can hear it in your ears. You can hear it when you drive.
And if you want to buy the book
Perfect.
and listen to the story at the same time, like if your eyeballs are too lazy to read on their own, then definitely just go on spacezamboni.com/audible and listen to Defending a Monster while you stare at it with your eyes. With that said, we're going back to the podcast. We love you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Murder We Spoke, where we are continuing to talk about John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown. So, as we go back into the meat of the topic, yes, he was making a lot of money. He was making over $100,000 a year
Yeah.
off of three
Yeah, 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 yeah,
KFCs
yeah.
up until
yeah.
getting mixed in with the whole.
He was a billionaire.
Yeah,
I
he
mean, not
would have been a
billionaire, but He
millionaire.
was a well-off man. Which
He would have had a lot of money today if he didn't end up doing all these heinous acts that he did do, because he had. If I owned 3 KFCs, I definitely would have planned on opening up more. I would have
Yeah,
been like,
honestly.
I own the East Coast of KFC.
like there's only
That's
3
it.
KFCs in the region.
Yeah,
Well,
like-
yes, and where he lived, there probably is only 3 KFCs in the span of 15 miles between each one.
yeah. Oh my God.
I could be wrong, just depending. I've never been there, so
Especially since generally, I mean, now it costs what, $500,000 to open up a chain. At that time, it was probably half that money. So half of his worth for
God.
the. I mean, I don't know. I'm just assuming. I'm probably sounding stupid.
No,
I
you're
would
sounding good.
I would love to go back and like actually look at how much it would have cost to open up a chain, because his father-in-law opened up 3 at one
Yeah.
time just for Gacy.
yeah.
So
Which
that's
is-
like, all right. It sounds like they're throwing away franchises at that
Yeah.
price.
I mean,
It's
it was
like,
I wouldn't say it was the very beginning, but it was the
Yeah.
beginning of fast food, you know, like
that's
it
true.
was the
Yeah.
incline of that. So yeah, they were popping up all over the place.
Oh my God.
But I know he did make a lot of money there.
Yep. Yeah. And I have the exact. I mean, it was $15,000, but they have the actual equivalent for today. So, like $134,550 a year from owning these 3 KFCs. And if he was alive now and not doing the things that he was doing, again,
He'd probably be making more. Than
yeah, I can't imagine him just stopping at 3.
Mind you, not he was like 36.
No pun intended.
So he was 36 at this point. That's a fact I learned that I always thought he was a lot older.
No.
I don't know. He wasn't.
But that's the other thing that I think caused these kids to end up falling into him, was seeming like he was out of shape. Like, what's this guy going to do to me? Come on.
Yeah. That
Like-
people see as like the friendly. He was a clown that came to your parties. He was the clown that would go, like you said, go see cancer patients.
Yeah.
He would.
He was a very, or from what it seemed like, a very upstanding citizen. So later on, after he ended up coming out of prison for a short while, he was a short cook and a short order cook in a restaurant.
He also missed his son's birth too, or he missed one of his kids' births because he was out doing what he does.
Yeah, big time.
Unfortunately.
Technically, this wasn't even from, this was at the time where he was just like kind of a sexual assaulter, not really a murderer at this time. But I think like from this first sexual assault thing.
I think that triggered him
Yeah,
to
big
be
time.
like, well, now I can't just leave them like that. Now I have to take further actions to silence them.
Yeah, because if I can't silence them from violence of being beaten or threats or whatever, then they can't live. That's it. Or
Which is not
I
good.
could be
Let me
wrong.
just-
I did some research for you guys as a
Yeah.
side note. So really quick side note. Back in the day, so I did.
Ooh, thank you. Yes.
The current calculation for KFC to open one today is about $245,000.
Ooh, that's still a lot of money.
So
Damn.
counting for inflation, back then it was $34,000.
Oh, my God.
$682. If it was today's price back then, accounting for inflation, in 71 it would be $34,000.
Oh, wow. All right.
Wow.
So, man, I was over the price of starting up a KFC. Wow. I never would have guessed that. Jeez. I was expecting at least like 50,000, but holy moly. All right. So that changes the game up. Yeah. So that's not even his full pay for the month. For the year, I should say. For the year. If he's making $134,000 a year or whatever, then you know what? Just that small old chunk, you could open up another
God.
KFC.
all I have to say is Jesus.
Yeah.
He messed up. So, I mean, I don't.
My
Jeez.
apologies if anything's wrong with that, or if you owned a KFC back in the 70s.
You're doing
and
good,
90s.
Yeah,
Alex.
unless it was just because of the area. Maybe that was the medium price for it, for like state-wise. Maybe in other states, maybe like New York, it would be a little bit more money.
Yeah.
But in like median rate, maybe even there, it could have been a little bit lower if that's the case, if they were trying to do that kind of median range price of opening up a KFC. But still, regardless of what it was, like he could have been the monopoly of KFC.
Yeah. Which he ended up choosing a different path, which is not good. He ended up,
And even after he ended up coming out of his arrest and being this short line cook for a little bit, he did his additional trainings or additional work where it came to just doing like small side jobs,
I also
remodeling,
think,
landscaping.
Like, deep inside, like it's since prison, it's been there. But I feel like he needed to build this up to be like a disguise behind what he was doing.
And who knows, maybe in prison he learned how to be better at doing what he ended up doing later on. Because a lot of the times when people go to prison, from what a lot of people say, like scientists or researchers or whoever it is that goes in and does these psychological analyses of all these people that are incarcerated and everything, like a lot of the times they don't end up coming out recidivized. They end up coming up just better criminals, like how to hide their criminality a lot better.
Again, prison system.
Unless you
very
work for
broken.
Dave's Killer Bread.
But
Which is the thing. Thank God for them, because they're actually getting these guys doing things that are, getting them back into society, not being better criminals.
yeah, a lot of companies do it.
Yeah, thankfully,
But back
it's
then,
not
not
just them,
really.
but true.
So-
Yeah. Who wants to hire somebody with a jail history or like anything like that? I mean, a lot of the times, if you go to jail, that's kind of like it. That's your permanent record of life.
I was very surprised how he could jump back, but then and then all of a sudden spiral.
Yeah. But again, that was from him opening up his own business. It's not like he went back into a regular workforce or anything. Like he was smart
He had
enough
help.
to.
He
Yeah,
had help.
exactly. Like
right
he
out of
was
the gate,
smart
he had
enough
help.
that. Sure, he had that job where I'm sure they probably looked past it like, oh, sure, you're in jail, whatever. Okay. You need work, and it seems like you're okay. If you came out so soon and everything, how bad could you be?
John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, that's what everybody
Wayne
found
Gacy.
out later on because, sure, he was there for a little bit. He started mid-1973, and then by 1975 had his own business. So there we go. He was already, it seems like, planning ahead to his next move. So that way he could be independent and didn't have to do this job anymore. Something where he had more flexibility and everything, and a lot more free time, unfortunately, to do what he would later on end up doing. Besides the clown gig, where, He had two different personalities.
Yeah, he had
Pogo the
two
Clown,
different
Patches the
clowns
Clown.
for two different personalities. So
Yep.
one clown would be like jokey, and as far as I know,
Happy
the other
clown.
clown would
Yep.
not be
Serious.
as jokey. So the people are like, are those his two
Personalities.
that he
Yep.
just like, you know, he, like even later on when he ended up in jail, he did paint clowns and his
Yeah, big time.
personalities, and he
And
continued
he painted
to,
himself as Patches the
Yeah.
Clown and things like
and
that.
not just
yeah.
anybody, but it's a.
Did the two clowns have different costumes, or was it the same?
It was
outfit?
different paint and different
Yeah.
costumes.
Okay.
I think. Maybe
I think
I know
so.
for sure his paint on his face was different for each one,
Okay.
and the one that is pointier is the not so great one, and the one that
Yeah.
is it? Am I right? With
Pogo.
the one that's rounder.
Oh,
Is
Pogo
it?
was the happy one, and Patches was the one that was the serious
is
one.
the
Yeah, yeah,
serious one, which is
So,
spooky.
yep. So, technically, what we were alluding to before was about his first arrest, where it involved this 15-year-old child, one of the son of one of the JCs. And I call them the MCs. Sorry, everybody. JCs, correction, the JCs. So that was one of the people that were part of that stag film and the pornography and everything like that. So, yeah, he lured him down with stag films. And they were supposed to be heterosexual at the time. That's where you lead everybody to. And then a lot of times end up showing them like homosexual stag films or something like that, and with alcohol. But lo and behold, sure, he actually did have him watch like a heterosexual pornography film and probably had alcohol. But then he started performing the oral sex on him and everything. That's what caused him to get arrested the first time, because that's the kid that ended up getting beaten up and everything like that. So that's how he ended up getting arrested, and that's where it seems like we both agree about where it seems like the murders started occurring is after he got out.
After he got out, as soon as that kid went to the police and reported him, and he went to jail, and he got charged with I'm not going to say, he got charged with something really bad.
Yeah.
He came out. I think his mindset changed on how he would handle the situation, being that instead of letting them go and paying them off, there is no paying them off.
Yeah.
If they're alive, then they're gonna tell somebody.
Yeah.
That was his there is no option. There is no option. There's one exception where the one person got away, but there is no option.
Yeah, no, besides murdering them and everything. And technically even it seemed like he still had moments where he wanted a relationship with these kids and everything like that. But it was like this one thing that really set him off big time. But before then, even before he ended up doing any kind of horrible murders or anything like that, after he came out of jail, he was married a second time. But then later on, he told his wife that he's bisexual.
And she left him. Yeah. So I think he
even told her at one point, he's like, it was on Mother's Day. He's like, this is going to be the last time I'm going to have sex with you.
Yeah,
and that was it.
Yeah.
And even she knew that something was off about him because she was able to smell everything.
Yeah,
she smelled that there was something rotting in the house.
It wasn't a basement.
No, it was a crawl space. Yeah.
Which means it's
it's flooring right above dirt, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's I know what I read, it was right after he came out and said that he was bisexual to her that she left, but I also did read that the same comment, he was like, I'm not gonna sleep with you anymore.
Yeah.
That's it. We're done. I'm done, by the way.
Yep.
Not I would think that relationship really did have anything like that.
Yeah, that's nuts. She had two daughters too, so not only did he have his own kids, but he had two stepdaughters that he would keep in contact with, even after he was incarcerated and everything for murdering all these young kids.
People noticed, his sister noticed.
She thought it was off
came over with
because
the mom.
she knew the smell too. She also picked up on it.
She came over. His mom lived with him at some point in that house.
She lived with him up until his second marriage.
You really need to, get an exterminator in here. There's definitely an animal died. Something doesn't smell right in here. So she was very concerned that nobody suspects that their sibling killed somebody. My first thought would be
Yeah.
a mouse died in the house. Something died. Go get it checked out.
Raccoon,
Like,
possum, or something
yeah,
weird.
Like, it wouldn't be
especially
the
a crawl
first thing
space
on my mind, especially with him. But yeah, it did escalate and get worse.
Oh my God! Yeah, it got exponentially
yes,
worse because later on it gets so bad. Sure, like his first victim was Timothy McCoy.
I heard he was like from what interviews I heard that he was actually really like sweet boy.
Yeah, he was a really good kid.
And they were like he was like a really good kid. He wasn't like a runaway type.
Yeah.
He was like
No,
people adored him. So.
Yeah. And he was somebody that actually, seemed consensual when it came to Gacy and everything like that. Because he picked him up from a Greyhound bus terminal. They ended up spending the night together. He actually ended up waking Gacy up, trying to wake him up because he made him breakfast. But he had the knife in his hand still.
Yeah,
He had the knife in his
I
hand.
forgot about this.
Yeah,
Matt.
which is really sad. This is probably one of the sickest things
He woke
ever.
up and it was the boy, not the
Yeah, it was the
woke
boy.
up and
He woke up
was
Gacy.
making
He's like,
breakfast
hey.
for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah. Accidentally cut Gacy because Gacy ended up getting startled. They had the knife in his hand. So when he had, due to Gacy pushing him away or whatever, he ended up like raising the knife and accidentally cutting Gacy, sending him into a rage.
Yeah, and it's
But
hard.
then also the kid fought back too because Gacy started fighting back. The kid kicked him in the stomach. Gacy says, "Motherfucker, I will kill you."
Yeah.
Then he wrestled him to the ground and stabbed him to the chest.
Yeah.
And like during that whole stabbing part, that's what kind of like set him off too. Because as he was like gurgling on blood, that's where Gacy's like, no, this is kind of like turning me on. Because those gurgling sounds, the gurgulations, as like Gacy would put it, that's what kind of like aroused him.
term.
Yeah.
It just
Gurgulation.
It was hard to even like this. This had to be the hardest case to read on.
Yeah. No,
it
big
was
time.
very like it wasn't like he had like he was a sociopath, but it wasn't like he had a mental illness. It was like
No.
like a lot of his stuff he did was on purpose and like he knew what he was doing.
It's just like he was trying to keep himself like consistently in the closet. Like he didn't want anybody to know about it. Homosexuality wasn't widely accepted and everything. And plus he was going for politics. He was a successful businessman who it seems like he just didn't want that getting out there to the public. I mean, sure, he had that history with that kid that, one of the JCs and everything like that. But still, regardless, even then, even at that point, there was still JCs that were vouching for him. They're like, listen, I don't believe these people's stories that they're talking about you. You're just too good of
I
a
think that
person.
fed into like his ego.
Yeah,
too.
big time.
Later on, it fed into like a nah. No.
And that's what essentially got him caught was his ego in the long run.
They actually said he would have got away with it if he just
Didn't invite the police over into his house.
That too. I don't understand that.
Plus, if he said that he was at that pharmacy that day.
They said, "Are you at this pharmacy that the last boy was seen?" And he goes, "No." And they're like, "We have receipts that you were there."
Yep.
If he would have said yes, the police said. If he would have said,
would've
"Yeah, I
gotten
was
away
there,"
with it.
they said we would have looked someplace else, and he would have gone. But he flew. They knew about him. They were watching him before that. They said because he had a very long rap sheet of things that he's done. They were already.
Yeah, plus even before he murdered this
like-
kid, he ended up assaulting another person that was just like he pulls up to him, he's like, "Oh, you want to get high?" He's they're smoking in the car, and then he puts like chloroform over the guy's mouth. Gacy was big into chloroform. He would knock people out, take them to his house, chain them up, and then strangle them for a bit. But that guy got away too, the one that ended up having the chloroform. He ended up getting his face burned so badly. They have the pictures before and after of like everything. And he ended up coming to court later on to try and get Gacy put away for good. But he couldn't even really stand up in court for it because he was so traumatized from the experience.
They said he got so good at strangulation that he could time when things would happen in a person, like when they would stop fighting as much, when they would make certain sounds. He would know every minute of what it took to do that.
The crazy thing with Matt's situation too, because I was telling my wife about this before, but the case where the guy was, assaulted by Gacy, he picked him up, said wanted to get high. This guy, the police actually they didn't even care at first.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening is
They thought it was a lover's quarrel.
Yep. So he ended up stalking and finding Gacy. And even after he found Gacy, the police were like, "Oh, we don't care. It's another butt fucking."
Yep.
Yeah, they were he was smart in one sense, is that he would pick up boys that nobody would look for.
Yeah, a lot of
Nobody
times-
would look for I mean, their parents would look for them, but it wouldn't be like a big manhunt.
Yeah,
a lot of the
They were kinda
there's
like
still 3 victims that are
strays.
unknown. The 32, I think it's 35 now.
Then there's
They
one
said they're-
person that they aren't even sure if it's actually the boy that
Yeah,
they
they gave it
discovered.
back. They're like, we don't know.
And this one mother swears, she's still like swearing up and down
I
that
thought
that's
they
not her
tested
kid.
it. I thought they tested it and the
They
DNA
did.
didn't match. And they're like, that's not my kid.
Yeah.
Whose kid is that? That's not mine. That's
And that's the
sad.
other thing is that they exhumed that boy's corpse again to try and like do DNA testing,
anything
or at
else,
least
man.
do the dental records. They couldn't even find the jaws
Well, back
because
then-
they chopped the jaws out of the people.
back then
Yeah.
the only identification they had, because they didn't do like through DNA. I read was through dental.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot
Yep.
of dental, a lot of these boys were either like runaways or they didn't live with their parents, and a lot of them I think I said there's 3 that are still unidentified as to who they are. They don't know who they are, and that I was like, oh god.
Yeah, it's crazy. And technically, I mean, sure, there's 33 that seem to be known kills and everything because of where they discovered the bodies and everything. But there's still so many other people that have gone missing that they attribute it to Gacy.
I even wonder because his basement got so full.
Yeah,
of,
he started
of
dumping them in the
people.
river.
He started moving them and dumping them to the river. He was like, no, he buried 2 in his backyard. I think it was 2 or 3, and then all of his crawl space
Some in
was
the
done,
woods,
and
too.
then some in the woods and
Yep.
some in the river. So some of them they haven't even probably even found. I wouldn't be surprised if he was doing this earlier on and he just
Yeah.
admitted to with the ones that he did. But he liked the attention. So they said he would go, oh, yeah, I did it. And talk because he liked the attention
that's what it
of
ended.
that.
Especially like later on when all the stuff hit the fan and everything, especially when the first bodies were found, he was just like spilling out the
He was like,
information
blah,
like
blah,
he
blah,
was
blah.
proud
He
of
gave
it. Like it
all
was
of
just
it.
like
He gave all of it.
not
He
even
would
a
even
second
go and
thought
show
kind of
them.
thing.
He would go and show them. I'll go
He
show
drew
you.
them a diagram
Yeah, I'll show
about
you.
where all the
Yeah.
bodies were in the basement on like a napkin, and all the police were like glued to every word they was saying because initially he was denying it.
Yeah,
Then
the
he
detec-
released all of it, and then later on he ended up denying it
The
again.
detective was like, no. They suspected him. They're like, but he's like, there's no way, before they went into his house, because he invited them in his house for some reason. I don't know. And as soon as the police stepped in there, they're like, dead bodies. They smell dead bodies. They said they didn't even dig any in the dirt.
Yeah.
And they just bones.
Yep.
Automatically bones. So the police officers at first were like, no way could this guy, you think he actually has, bodies in there? You actually think he does? And then they stepped in there like, oh, he does.
Would you mind getting into how a guy with that build and shape was able to dig so many holes? And
That's the thing that is kind of like up for debate, is because it seems like that even in the documentary that we watched and everything, it would allude to that he had accomplices. I mean, he had 2 young adults or older teenagers living in his house with them later on when he was towards the end of like his killing spree and everything like that. And 2 people that were like living with them, he would honestly like set up a little area for them to dig. He would be like, listen, dig between these lines. They're
Don't
roped
dig
off.
anywhere else.
Yeah.
Just dig
if
here.
You did,
Yeah.
And he would peek his head through this crawl space hole and everything like that, just to make sure that they're not digging outside the lines or anything like that.
I thought I heard that they said that they thought he was going to lay like piping
pipe for
down
plumbing.
or something like that.
That's what it was.
And that's why they dug it. But I was like, so you had no idea it smelled like that? I mean, the normal person would be like,
the kids
oh,
thought it
there's
was
somebody
sewage
dead.
a lot of the time.
Yeah.
The kids thought it was
understandable that you're like, because death smells like death. So a dead, raccoon versus a dead, you don't really know until you know, honestly. But, it's very distinct smell.
And that's why he was throwing down lime a lot of the times in his crawl space and everything to try and cover up the smell. Because that's
Joke's on him, it didn't do anything.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's
But,
what he heard. He heard that lime would clear up the smell, didn't clear up the smell, probably degraded the bodies like quicker, if anything. But that's about it. Like, it still smelled horrible.
Yeah,
right?
how they actually arrested him before he even admitted anything was because he offered young boys marijuana. He went, "You want to hear some marijuana for free?"
Yeah,
And the cops were like, "You're arrested now." They were already following him. Like they would go to arrest. He knew that they were following him, so he would joke around with them and go up to the car, and he'd be like, "Hey, do you want some marijuana?" to the cops. Like, as a joke, because he knew they were following him. But
he was cocky. He was cocky because suddenly he would tell them where he was going anyways, because he felt that he was never going to get caught. So he'd be like, listen,
he thought
here.
It was a joke.
Plus he was doing so many different jobs in different locations and everything. Or these are his words from the documentary and everything. Like, he would honestly go to the police officers in the morning because he knew he was being tailed. So he'd be like, listen, I'm going to be going here. I'm going to be going here, and I'm going to be going here. You know, I'm going to tell you these locations so we don't get lost and everything.
He showed up late one time. He showed up late, like hours late, for an interview that they called him in for, covered in dirt, all like sweaty, and they said, "What happened to you?" And he goes, "Oh, my car broke down. The car broke down near the river." Put two and two together there at the end of the day. It's like, okay, he just didn't care, and that detective wasn't in at the time, so they're like, "You could go, just go." That was before everything, and you know, we can go on and list his victims because I feel like they need to be represented in here too.
Yeah. Oh my God. I intently would collect bits and pieces of all the people that he murdered, not like physical body parts or anything, but stuff that was valuable, whether it be watches or school rings or anything like that, cars even. Like, he ended up
license. Oh my God.
He ended up giving one of his workers another person's car and everything because he's like, oh yeah, that person ran away. I ended up buying this car off of him because he needed money to go to like California or whatever.
At the last minute, I watched an interview with his sister, and his sister thought it was weird when they were tailing him. At the last minute, he just started swiping his credit card and buying toys and gifts for everybody, and then he came and gave it to them.
Yeah.
And the sister's like, "Why are you doing this? Well, you don't have the money to pay this off." He goes, "Because I might not be able to give these gifts to my nieces and nephews or anybody ever again." He goes, "Just don't worry about it." And shortly after, he was arrested. So.
Yeah, it's crazy that there's still like family members still alive.
The sister's older, but she's
older.
like in her like 60s. She's not that old.
She's in the documentary. It's really interesting hearing her own words.
Everything. But he had a temper. Like, he would like attack her husband. He would attack her husband a lot because he said something about their mom. Like, he would like lose it, like on a drop of a hat. But you don't think about it. You don't think about it.
They have a movie about Gacy where it's, the guy from Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
I didn't watch it, though.
Where it shows him as being very short-tempered. A lot of the people, he was always, like, cursing them out. I mean, sure, he would have his act where he would have a really good demeanor and everything like that, but generally it seemed like in that movie they would portray him as a horrible person that would always... And even, like, as you read about him... with the accomplices that people speculate he was working with or had dug graves and everything like that for these kids that he murdered, like, he would even go off on them, like, you better get your story straight. You better not, give anything away. Yeah, he was very intimidating behind the curtains.
I'm not surprised reading into this.
Dang.
His last person that he, disappeared that was connected with him led to him being arrested, really. If you would like to go into it.
Yes. So this is Robert Peace. This is the last person that ended up getting killed by John Wayne Gacy. This is the person that ended up getting him caught because thankfully this was a really good kid. This kid wouldn't run away from his family or anything. His mother was actually waiting for him to come out of work to pick him up and everything. and he just never made it to the car.
Well,
Gacy,
what he went to the car, from what I read, he went to the car and said,
Oh, yeah,
this
I'm gonna
guy,
talk to
this guy
Yeah.
says he has a contract job for me. It makes way more than what I'm making. I'm going to go for that interview. And it was the mom's birthday, and she was waiting to pick the kid up to go go to her birthday party, and the kid never returned. So she went home and got her husband, her kids, and her 2 German shepherds to try to find the kid because they couldn't find him. I felt really bad. I wanted to add that detail that it was her birthday, the mom's birthday, when the kid went missing.
Yeah, and back then they didn't search for missing people until
Yeah.
like 72 hours, I think.
Yeah, 72 hours. That's what came up with the Amber Alert, so that way kids could be looked for a little bit sooner. So, yep.
Yeah.
So apparently Gacy had a couple accomplices. These are all the kids that Gacy had killed. Technically, there's a couple
Yeah,
of
there's
spots
more than
missing
that,
because
yeah.
there's pictures that are missing of
That they
the
don't
children
know
that they are looking for. All
at
these
that.
ages,
18, 19,
yeah, the oldest
21,
one I think
19,
was
17.
21.
Adult man? A man?
That we
You
know
deem
of.
this
The
as a
oldest
man?
one that we know of was
Like
21
21.
years old. So
You deem
all
that
the
a
other
man?
ones are way younger.
I don't deem that a man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, big
Let me
time.
state that again.
The youngest one, it appears, is 14, so
Mm-hmm.
that's the youngest. Oldest being 21. That's the crawl space that he had to go through. He was a large man, which is why they believe he had accomplices.
Yeah, but he wasn't skinny.
And that's the sketch that he drew, correlating to all the graves that he dug for these kids,
And
or
I-
had people dig graves
I
for.
think it's very telling to see that he knows exactly where they're buried. He did this on purpose. There was no like, oh, he might have been, out of his mind. He might have blacked out. There's no way. He wouldn't have known where they were, exactly where they were.
There's a crawl space with everything labeled out, where they started digging up the bodies as well as the markings of where they found these bodies and everything. And sure, they had him pinned down as like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing, a Jekyll and Hyde character initially to try and testify for his innocence. As like a paranoid schizophrenic or having multiple personalities, because he supposedly was like throwing out 4 different personalities. But
That's just an act for me.
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way you had no idea about this. There's they had like 5 or 6 different psychiatrists trying to figure out what he had, but in the end, they all agreed that he ended up being a sociopath. And they were like, he is the definition. If you want to know what a sociopath is, you look him up in the book, because that's who he is. He can con people. He can get away with it. He can smile. He's very good at convincing people of things. Even after his whole trial, he's in jail. This is a prime example. He's in jail after he's convicted. Instead of becoming a better person, what he does is he paints in jail.
Yeah.
And then he tries to sell the pictures to people for hundreds of dollars, even though he's not a good painter. The government turns around and goes, no, we're going to take the money from you now because you shouldn't be gaining money from your notoriety. Which I was like, that proves that he tried to get money and swindle people and convince people and do the same things a sociopath would do.
I genuinely think that he thought he was going to get out.
Yeah, big time. He felt that he was going to get out.
He said, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. He turned around and go, no. And they're like, we found the bodies in your house. No.
Even
didn't
after
do
that,
it.
I forget
None of them.
what the newspaper had. It had like some kind of destination on it. He circled it and gave it to like the lawyer or whatever that was arguing his case and being like, I'll see you there after the case. Like he
His
swore
lawyer
he was going to get.
laughing in the interview I watched that she goes, the fact that he thought that he would actually get out. She goes, everybody knows John Wayne Gacy. Nobody's going to let him get past parole. There's no way they're going to let him out. She goes, I just rode along with him until all of his retrials were all used up. And then she was like, then he was on his own.
She fought. The lawyer
did.
really fought to.
She fought to not
she
have
had the
him
death
killed.
sentence.
Yeah, she wanted
She
that
wanted
as
him
like
to
a big
keep
case.
in prison.
Yeah, because
But
you know,
she lost.
Yeah.
So
what better to fight for than pure evil if you're gonna be able to get
This guy-
any kind of notoriety with your
if
law?
He got
your law firm.
sentenced. He got sentenced and the jury came back in minutes.
2 hours.
2 hours. It was like 2 hours.
And that was the
back with
quickest
verdict.
deliberation that a jury's ever had.
no way.
Like, even the lawyers that were hanging out at the bar across the street or whatever, they were like, yeah, we didn't expect it to go that fast. Usually the deliberation is
Takes
hours.
days
Hours.
sometimes.
Yeah.
I think
It was a dive bar they were
Yeah.
all hanging out in.
he got convicted of the death penalty. I think to his last dying breath, when he got executed, I think this proves a lot. His last words. Would you like to explain his last words?
His last words were "kiss my ass."
That was his last words in front of the victim's parents. Anybody to get any solace, not even "I'm sorry."
Technically, when he was executed, there was a mishap, and there was like an 18-minute gap or hour gap where like nobody knew. Correction, it took 18 minutes for the entire thing to go through.
Good.
But there was like a long gap between from when he was supposed to be executed to when he was actually executed, and nobody got to see it because it was all from like a television, like in a separate location. Nobody got to do it. Like,
I don't think he should get
like right in front of
I
him.
think that's for me the perfect way that he should have gotten executed because he liked the attention of everything. Why give him any pleasure towards anything at all during his last moments? I think for him that's a perfect way for him because he doesn't get what he wants in the end. And, he doesn't hurt anybody else, In a sense, it's sad that the families don't get to. I wouldn't even call it closure, to be honest, because it's not really closure for families,
Do you know who bought this painting?
Oh my God. I'm going to take a wild guess and say the man who buys everything. Is it, what's his face? National Treasure? No?
National Treasure?
The guy who, the map on the back of the Declaration of Independence, right?
Nicolas Cage?
Nicolas Cage.
No.
Nicolas Cage buys everything.
No, Zach Bagans.
Really?
Yeah. He bought John Wayne Gacy's clown self-portrait to add to his Museum of Haunted Objects. Yep.
That's all I have to say.
He probably
John
has
Wayne
other stuff,
Gacy
too.
was also in South Park.
He was. I remember that episode.
There he is.
And all of the fan favorites. Ugh.
Yeah, of all things to gain notoriety
I forgot
for,
about
now
that.
he's the murderous portion of Three Stooges getting an accurate cake.
Yeah. This was a very hard one this time for, especially because
Yeah.
everybody was very young and
Yeah.
he was like totally okay with saying everything.
Yeah, big time.
What's his MacBook Air?
That's why I feel like it's better to get this one out early and done with. That way we don't have to worry about it later on because I feel like this is as harsh as possibly we could go. I mean, sure, any serial killer is not an easy topic to talk about, but this one's just really, really rough because of the ages that these people that he would seek out and murder and everything. And it's terrible because, a lot of everybody here is gay, married and everything and working on having kids and having that thought of like, having your kid go missing and not knowing where they are and possibly...
I think that's worse. I think, for me, I think that's worse not knowing if your kid's alive, if your kid's, if your kid died, where are they? Are they out there? But that's the moral of the story is...
big time.
This guy's a horrible person. He did horrible things, and he got what he deserved in the end.
Yeah, always have a good rapport with your kids. Always know their friends. Always know their whereabouts. Always have them
Stranger
follow
danger.
up, text with you or whatever.
That's it.
It's
Stranger
definitely
danger.
reinforce stranger danger, please. That way nothing like this ever occurs. If anybody
Air
gives you a
tags.
weird feeling,
Air tags on your kids.
keep an eye on that person because you never know it. They could be an upstanding citizen, but who knows? If they give you a weird vibe, you trust your gut. That's it.
That's the moral of today's story.
And with that said, that is Murder We Spoke involving John Wayne Gacy.
Woohoo! Thank God that's over.
Yeah, I'm Matt,
I'm Rachel.
and we'll catch you on the next episode. Bye.